Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Riot Statikk, and we are here for the usual patch 11.3 rundown, where we go over everything that's changing for the next patch and sort of why we're doing it. So, yeah, glad to be back, Statikk.
Of course, it feels like it's been a while, but it probably just literally been a very normal cadence.
So this patch was actually one of the first ones where I've been mostly busy with other stuff, and you've really taken the control and like you're really leading up the balance pod. So what was your general approach for this patch?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I'll just put out there is usually when we do a B patch, we had to do an 11.2 B patch to address kind of like the Elderwood meta among other things. There's not a lot of room, a lot of time or room to kind of like breathe and have a strong plan for the next patch because we literally just released a patch and then we're like talking and doing the same patch for 11.3. So 11.2b, 11.3 are like, for me, a lot of this was just like let's do some obvious small changes to things that we know aren't working or are working too well in some specific cases, and let's just see how the meta is playing out because we've done a lot of changes. It's a new mid-set expansion, and off the back of a B patch, I kind of want to just calm down and like assess the survey the land, and so it's a pretty small patch overall.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that's going to shock a lot of people is that it's probably the smallest patch we've done post launch. Usually we come out with like some pretty big changes, pretty big adjustments, and this is relatively small. So is that like just a change in approach from me to you, or just like you said, is it mostly because of the B patch?
I think it's mainly a B patch thing. I personally, I do think there's a little bit of philosophy difference. I really think there's room for us to kind of like let players figure things out a little bit, and I do think there's a lot of looming and big problems coming soon, and those will be probably the bigger patches. But I definitely don't want to set up the expectation that we'll be like doing big patches every patch. So sometimes it will be small like this. So
Okay, cool. Well, with that, let's dive into it. On the trait side, Dragon Soul, when the blessing is passed on after death, the ally's next basic attack will immediately trigger Dragon Breath. So, what used to happen was, let's say Shyvana had 3 attacks out of the 5 needed, and she died, it would pass on to, say, Tristana at 3 out of 5. Now it passes as 5 out of 5. Is that correct?
that's exactly how it works on the backside. But hopefully, the way you feel it in game is just you're seeing a lot more Dragon's Breath moments, especially when your team is getting slaughtered, and you might be able to kind of like essentially just like turn the tide of the fight a little bit. I think testing it was really cool feeling. I'm not sure how powerful it is because obviously this is an on death effect, so like you're only getting the value if person who's the Dragon Soul is actually dying. So um, Dragon Soul overall is like not performing amazingly. It's not necessarily like horrible, but it's not doing extremely well. So we thought we could throw it a small buff. We weren't sure if it's the trait itself or maybe some of the units because some of the units are also struggling inside the trait. So wanted to do a small thing, but this is kind of more for just like a cool feel thing. So hopefully there's just more dragon breaths happening when you're playing Dragon Soul.
Cool. All right, Divine, and I teased you and Kent about this a little bit because it's a tradition of Fates that the second patch reworks Divine. But here we have Divine. Now the duration is flat, so it's 6 seconds at all levels, but the true damage and damage reduction scaled. And if you remember, the original version of this was the duration was forever. And then I believe the true damage and damage reduction scaled. So we're kind of in this interesting middle ground between the two. So what made us decide to make these changes?
Yeah, I mean, Divine, the kind of rework we did in the first half of the set just really didn't land well. Like what basically ended up happening was, to an extent, Divine Two was fine. Divine Four was also okay, and then going farther than that was generally a trap, and it's not really something we want to do with such a kind of like core origin or trait, that goes that high. But we kind of just noticed like the levers we gave ourselves was kind of limited. So the duration is just like, going to 15 seconds just seemed to not really make a huge difference from 9 seconds. There was kind of like when you get to the later parts of a TFT game, like those opening 8 seconds or 9 seconds are kind of like a big deal, and after that, it's like it's kind of whatever. So yeah, we kind of the one success I would say of that last mini rework was we still like the idea of like this kind of temporary ascension where the divine units become like gods. They become god tier and kind of like get to smash the enemy team. And so just hanging on to that identity, but actually hopefully making it actually effective is our hope here. We had a lot of scares last expansion because of Warwick. Like he just seemed to be synergized so well with the divine effect. Whenever we buffed it to like a high enough amount, he generally just like went too crazy. So without him in the mix, we felt a little bit safer about pulling some of these true damage and damage reduction, which are like two of the scariest stats, more like they're just like terrifying stats to push up. We were less scared of it this time for sure because of characters like Warwick not abusing the effects so powerfully. I mean, it might still be really powerful, but hopefully that 6 seconds, if you can like survive that barrage of the divine ascensions, you can kind of turn it around on them if they didn't beat you then. So
yeah, what's interesting is basically 4 divine comes out the other end exactly the same as it is on live. 3 ends up debatably weaker but debatably stronger because it lasts twice as long. And then 6 and 8, I think, will be pretty interesting. I'll consider this a success if like we can see some 8 divine winning some lobbies. That'd be pretty cool. But I'll also consider it a failure if the S plus tier becomes unkillable Kale because you can't kill her because she has 65% true damage in DR. So, but I don't think that'll happen.
It's scary, yeah. I mean, like we from what we saw, like 4 divine was doing well, so we kind of did use that as like the anchoring point here, and everything else was kind of like how could we thought we could make them. In the case of 2 divine, we thought we could like maybe slightly buff it, but it was probably okay. And then 6 and 8 needed some serious buffs. And is this a buff? It's hard to say, but based on what we've tested, it does seem like it's a bit stronger. I don't know if it's going to be in meta, but.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, Spirit. So Spirit's been an interesting one because the entire PBE cycle, I think we went back and forth on this between 40% and 35%, and Chosen counting as 2 and counting as 1. So what made us kind of go back to four piece going to 35%?
Yeah, I think on PBE it was I think you had it normally at this value more, and I think I was playing on PB, and every time I played it, it just felt like really lackluster. And I think the reality of Spirit is attack speed just synergizes too well with specific units within the set. And when I say specific units, I really mean like Zed and then a little bit of Kale. And it's kind of the unfortunate thing, I think, for Spirit. It's like it sounds like a thing you would just splash in, like, oh, give everyone attack speed. That's good, right? Like attack speed works on everyone. It builds mana for the next spell, and like it does damage if you're building AD. But it just turns out that it just synergizes so well with the attack speed-based characters that I feel like we kind of have to tune Spirit ultimately around those high-end cases. And for Spirit in general, like based on our data, was looking pretty good for such a small amount of investment. It wasn't absurd, but we saw that it could take a hit, and we were seeing Diana and Zed doing really well even post B patch. So this is a small way for us to kind of control that. And my only regret is if this makes Force Spirit now unplayable in any other comp at all, because it was already seeing such little play. But man, this is like the hard part of balancing TFT. It's like, do you balance it for like the best case or the worst case? And that's, I know you've been through that a lot too.
Oh so. Yeah. It seems like this set in particular has felt it extra hard though, where it's just like the trait by itself, meh. The trait with one specific champion, woo. Elderwood has this as well with Asol. We saw this with the B patch, where it's just like those optimal cases are pretty gross. Even Vanguard, which is generally a pretty bad trait, it was like if you get that perfect Vanguard Mystic Ari, or now the Vanguard Fabled with 3-star Nico, it's like, oh, it can be good, but the rest of the time it's bad, and it's like, how do you balance that? So.
Yeah, this is like a really big, high-level design discussion that has to happen, because that's at some point like it's good for champions and traits and items to have cool synergies with each other, but to some extent we need to control that, right, and make sure that it's not over the top. But then if we control it too much, then it almost feels like you're not really combining things together to make cool things. And then what is TFT then? And it's just like this crazy problem.
Exactly. All right, and last one on the trait side. I think this one's also going to surprise a few people, because PBE, I think Slayer was nerfed and then nerfed and then nerfed and then nerfed and then nerfed. So all of a sudden we're going back and we're buffing it once. But it looks like just 6 Slayer here. What made you decide to do this?
I mean, Slayer. A lot of the Slayers are doing quite well. I think everyone knows, like Tryndamere, Olaf, Samira, obviously, and Zed, all performing very well. But playing them all together actually just is not actually that good. And I do think during PvE we definitely nerfed a lot of the actual Slayers themselves. I think Samira must have gone down like 10x from what she originally was. And I remember like arguing with one, like, "Hey, maybe we should go easy on this," and then we ended up nerfing it like 20 times. I swear. But yeah, the 6 Slayers is just not actually being played a lot or even much at all, and it's not doing very well. So we thought we could throw that a bone, but I think maybe some of this is also that like Darius is struggling so much and having to run Darius, and they're all kind of item hungry characters.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to think about with Slayer because right now I'm sure like if 6 Slayer gets played next patch, it's gonna be like, oh yeah, you just put your items on Samira and she basically kills everyone as it is right now, but just with a slightly different build.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah. Maybe there's a longer term project there, but it might be tough with what you can do on the champ side. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to champ changes. The champ changes are pretty interesting this patch because there's only 5 of them, and 4 of them are in the 1 cost range. So we'll start off with Brand. And I think we can all agree that Brand is probably the worst champ in the set. Probably. So I admit, even this surprised me a bit, where auto attack range is how we're going to fix him.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't necessarily the fix to Brand. There was a lot of things we were considering. It's weird because if you look at his numbers, they look pretty good. Like just in terms of like when we go into in our our tools and look at his values, like he doesn't look bad by any stretch of the imagination. I think part of his struggle is that he's in Dragon Soul, which is not necessarily going very well, and I don't think it synergizes particularly well with his kit. And then he has that unreliability that Nami didn't have, right? He can kind of miss his spell at times, and that is something that we were experimenting with as like, hey, can we have one cost who have really impactful spells but can miss? It feels like that's becoming a little bit of an issue here. So we're definitely scared to buff too many like Dragon Soul units and then also the trait at the same time.
Yep.
Considering some of the possibilities that already exist. I know like there's already experimentation with some Dragon Soul play, but so it's kind of we're just going easy. I think this is just hopefully to make positioning Brand a lot easier. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure how powerful or weak attack range changes are in general, and so that's just something that it'll help us gauge that a lot better. But Brand probably will need more buffs than this in the future. Just didn't want to go overboard in this one patch. So
cool, makes sense. Diana, I don't think anyone's going to debate this one. Orbs now spawn further away from her body when she increases in size. TLDR, hopefully we don't see those issues where Titans resolve, max stack, and she just has orbs spinning and they can't hit her melee target. So, again, I don't think anyone's going to debate that, but hooray.
Yeah, I think. But by the way, there's still one scenario in which this bug was not fixed, which is if you cast orbs and then you turn big, they're still going to be like the same distance they were originally. Like they won't like expand outwards. So there's a fringe case where this is still quite annoying, but maybe I'll find a way to fix it later on. I don't know, we'll see.
Okay, cool. One of the 2 bigger changes this patch, I think, is Elise, who is getting her total health nerfed, which I admit I was a little skeptical on, but we'll see. But the cool part here is now when she's in spider form, she monoreeves the targets she's auto-attacking. So I know at the start of this patch, I basically kind of gave you this like, hey, Elise is never worth 3-starring. She's one of the least fun champs in the game. What made you decide to go with monoreeve?
We in general, we were mainly looking at the issue that Elise is just not really a character you keep on your board. You don't really appreciate what she can do. And we were thinking about a lot of different types of effects that we could put into the game, and we were messing around with that. And we ended up talking to the set 4 lead Giovanni, and he kind of got excited about this idea. So we wanted to run with this, which is giving Elise kind of like a neurotoxic type of effect where she's mana reaving the targets when she turns into spider form. I think in reality, Elise's effect as it was even before this patch was powerful in stage, like 2, maybe a little bit into 3, but then fell off pretty hard. But her tags, cultist and keeper, are also extremely powerful at those windows.
Yep. Yep.
She kind of is like this all in early game champion, and we kind of wanted to give her some usefulness on the back end of the game, and you know and giving her this effect, I thought it was going to be like nothing. I thought maybe this is not going to do very much because it's going to get stuck on the tank, and then like what is she going to do? Just keep mana reaving the tank over and over? But in testing it, I was surprised how often she was getting to other targets at times. She's just staying alive because she's just so tanky at those parts in the game. And just as a last part of the note, we basically universalized the kind of mana reave effect here. So this is the first time we can go to a mana reave effect that's not the same number. So you can see that 3-star she actually goes up to a 50% mana cost increase, which I think may have been some of the original values we tested, or maybe we're even in the game at some point. But
yeah, very early galaxies.
Yeah, we haven't seen that in a while. So hopefully 3-star here definitely has a unique impact on the fights she's in. And I really think we needed to nerf the 1 and 2-star values because I think she's actually really strong at the time. But yeah.
Cool. All right. And last one is Tristana. Just gets a slight buff on her attack speed from her spell. I personally super agree with this. Tristana has been one of, if not, close to brand level underwhelming. Sharpshooters in particular have also kind of struggled a bit unless you really high roll them. So yeah, any thoughts here?
I think she's just another one of those suffered from PvE focus. Like we just saw her succeeding a ton in the very early parts of PvE, and then we kind of over nerfed her, I think. Here, I honestly think we could have gone a little bit farther, especially on like the 3-star values. But at the same time, similar to Brand, like we don't really want to like over buff it to the point where there's another reroll comp that's just really annoying to play against. So,
yeah, agree with that.
Trying to inch it up there and see if we can get her just to a point where she doesn't feel like a non-option. So we'll see. Maybe she needs more buffs, but this is hopefully a good start.
Cool. As I said, no 2-cost champions. So on to 3-cost, we just have Darius. Gets a slight spell power buff at 2 and 3-star. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard. We've looked at all of the similar to what I said on Brand. Like you look at Darius's values and they look good, and so really the biggest delta really is from him in previous sets, I guess at this point. Really that the new mechanic we put on, which is like the fall off after execution, which I think is really a good lever for us to make sure that Darius literally isn't just like auto killing your whole team when he's working, but trying to massage those numbers at this point is kind of the difficulty. He's got a good mana, a low-ish mana cost. He's got really good tank stats, and this is kind of one of the main levers I think to make him good. So we'll see. I don't think we can go too much farther in this space, but we'll have to see where this lands, because it's always a scary character. I know more, just as much as I do, that like these execution type characters, which we have one like Talon in the set that was ruling a certain part of that previous the original set 4 meta. It's similar here. It's just like we're like one buff off of him completely going nuts.
Yeah. So. The thing I'll call out is that we've got this big problem to solve long term here, which is that Darius is probably one of the most counterable champions in the game. It's like if he runs up against a Bramble Dragonclaw champion, he will never touch that champion with a 10-foot pole, whereas you go up against a low defense team and he will massacre them all and actually be pretty strong. And I know with the Elderwood meta, a lot of people were building Dragonclaws, which just made him even worse. And so we've had lots of discussions about like hard counter versus soft counter and things like that. So this will be an interesting one to solve long term, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think like magic damage in particular might be able to use some kind of like Last Whisper equivalent inside our item system or something.
Yeah, for sure. Nice, for sure. Okay, and the last change, this is kind of a buff, but not really. Basically, as Statikk mentioned, we are trying to standardize some of our debuffs. So like armor penetration, which went 40, 60, 80. We now have Monoreeve, which goes 35, 50, and I suppose someday we could use a third tier if we need to. Basically called Don't Cast. But this is just standardizing it to that same 35. barely makes a difference, I think, but still worth standardizing here. So
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll just have the same effect, which is Shroud is probably one of the worst items early, but then a really really strong item in the late game. So
yep, cool. All right, so yeah, like I said, that's it. Pretty small patch. You know, it's interesting because the meta, like if you watch like GV8's morning report, it's like the meta's in a good spot, or you look at like Seek's tier list, and it's like there's like 20 comps listed that are all pretty strong. But we're definitely seeing some challenges with set 4.5 and some of the perceptions around how the comps work. And so, like you said, I think those are a little bit longer term problems that we don't want to rush to something and do it wrong. So, and we still have 2.5 months left in the set. So I'm sure we'll be taking some bigger swings along the way. So
yeah, definitely looking at some of the systems like Chosen, like the new Lucky Lanterns we just released. We could even be looking at player damage, stuff like all these things that we're kind of just figuring out if they're actually doing what we need them to do. And those changes are really scary to do very quickly without a lot of like testing and analysis. So
yep.
Hopefully one of these future patches coming up soon is going to be really big and kind of address some of those more systemic frustrations. But yeah, definitely not going to be 11.3. So.
Cool. All right. Any other closing thoughts from you?
Hopefully everyone's enjoying the set the set 4.5. What are we calling it again? Festival of Beasts.
Festival of Beasts.
I'm terrible at calling it, but it's actual name.
You got to start that.
I know.
Cool. All right. Well, then that'll do it for this time. Patch comes out next Wednesday. Hope you enjoy it. And then, like I said, give us your feedback on what you are enjoying about set 4.5, what you're not enjoying. Honestly, the more feedback we get there from different place levels as well, not just challenger players, but also like platinum players, gold players, we'd love to hear your thoughts, as it helps kind of give us a wide view on where we can look and what we want to address to try to make the game fun. Not everyone's going to have the same experience, but we do want to try to make it as fun as possible for as many people as possible. So all right, that's going to do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.